The bullet whizzed past Marcus Finch's head so close he felt the heat singe his temple. And in that split second between life and death, he wondered if taking this surveying protection job would be his final mistake. He dove behind a cluster of rocks, his hand already drawing his Colt revolver as two more shots cracked through the dry Nevada air. The surveying equipment scattered across the ground, theodolite knocked sideways, but Marcus's primary concern was the young woman frozen 20 yards away, her blue dress stark against the ochre landscape, her hand still clutching a leather-bound notebook. "Get down!" Marcus shouted, firing twice at the ridge where muzzle flashes had betrayed the ambusher's position. The woman, Florence Kingsley, finally seemed to shake free of her shock and dropped behind a boulder, her auburn hair coming loose from its pins. Her father, the head surveyor Charles Kingsley, had been shot in the leg during the first volley and now lay groaning behind the supply wagon, blood seeping through his tan trousers. It was August 1883, and they had been 3 days out from Silver Peak, Nevada, surveying a potential route for a new mining road through the eastern reaches of the territory. Marcus had been hired in town specifically for this job, his reputation as a reliable gun preceding him despite his relative youth at 24 years old. The money was good, and the work had seemed straightforward enough. Map the terrain, protect the surveyors from the occasional mountain lion or rattlesnake, maybe some territorial disputes with prospectors. Nobody had mentioned anything about organized ambushes. Another volley of gunfire erupted from the ridge. Marcus counted at least 3 shooters, possibly 4. The expedition's other guard, an older man named Wesley, was nowhere to be seen, and Marcus had a sinking feeling the man had either fled or was already dead. "Miss Kingsley," Marcus called out between shots, "can you reach your father?" Florence's face appeared briefly above the boulder, pale but determined. She was 22, he knew, fresh from some Eastern college where women could study such things now, and this was supposed to be her grand adventure helping her father with his surveying business. Her green eyes met his across the dusty expanse. "I think so," she called back, her voice steadier than he would have expected. "Keep your head down and move slow. I will keep them busy." Marcus rose and fired 3 rapid shots at the ridge, providing cover as Florence scrambled toward the wagon where her father lay. He could see her torn between terror and determination, her practical boots kicking up dust as she ran in a low crouch. She made it safely, disappearing behind the wagon's bulk. The return fire intensified, forcing Marcus to duck as splinters exploded from the rock beside his head. He needed a new position, needed to flank them somehow, but he could not leave the Kingsleys exposed. His horse had bolted at the first shots along with most of the pack animals, leaving them stranded in this exposed valley with limited supplies. "Mr. Finch," Florence's voice carried across the space. "Father needs help. The bleeding will not stop," Marcus swore under his breath. He was a decent shot and could handle himself in a fight, but he was no doctor. Still, Charles Kingsley was his employer and, more importantly, a decent man who did not deserve to bleed out in the Nevada wilderness. "Can you shoot?" Marcus called back. There was a pause. "I have fired a rifle before." "Good enough." "There is a Winchester in the wagon bed. Lever action should already be loaded. Do not aim at anything specific, just make noise whenever I tell you." He could not see her from his position, but he heard the sounds of movement, the metallic click of a rifle being examined. The girl had steel in her spine, he would give her that. Most women of his acquaintance would be hysterical by now, but Florence Kingsley seemed more angry than afraid. "Ready," she shouted. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Florence's rifle cracked from behind the wagon, the shots wild but consistent. Marcus used the distraction to sprint from his cover to a better position behind a larger outcropping 30 feet closer to the ridge. Bullets chewed up the ground at his heels, but he made it unscathed. From this new angle, he could see one of the ambushers more clearly, a lean figure in a brown duster coat. Marcus took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. The man jerked backward with a cry and disappeared from view. The gunfire from the ridge immediately became less coordinated, more panicked. "That is one down," Marcus shouted. "Keep shooting, Miss Kingsley." The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning the valley into a furnace. Sweat stung Marcus's eyes as he reloaded, his fingers moving automatically through the familiar motions. He had been in gunfights before, had killed men when necessary, but it never got easier. Each time his heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Another figure broke cover on the ridge, trying to circle around. Marcus dropped him with 2 quick shots. The remaining ambushers finally seemed to lose their nerve because the shooting stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of horses retreating at speed over the far side of the ridge. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the wind and Charles Kingsley's labored breathing. Marcus waited several minutes, watching for any signs of a trick, but the ambushers were truly gone. "Clear," he finally called out, emerging from cover with his revolver still drawn. Florence appeared from behind the wagon, the Winchester clutched in her hands, her face smudged with dust and powder smoke. Her elaborate traveling dress was ruined, torn at the hem and stained with her father's blood. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Marcus thought she had never seen a more striking woman. There was a fierce light in her eyes that spoke of courage rather than hysteria. "Father is in bad condition," she said without preamble. "The bullet went through his thigh, but the bleeding is severe." Marcus hurried to the wagon where Charles lay, his face gray with pain and blood loss. The surveyor was a portly man in his 50s, usually jovial and enthusiastic about his work. Now he looked 20 years older, his breathing shallow. "Let me see," Marcus said, kneeling beside the wounded man. Florence had already torn strips from her petticoat and attempted to bind the wound, but blood seeped through the makeshift bandages. Marcus had seen enough injuries on various trails to know this was serious. The bullet had torn through the meat of the thigh, possibly nicking the artery. "We need to cauterize it," Marcus said grimly. "It is the only way to stop the bleeding out here." "No," Charles gasped. "Just bind it. I will be fine." "Father, please," Florence said, her voice cracking for the first time. "Let him help." Marcus looked at her, seeing the fear beneath her brave facade. "Have you ever assisted with something like this?" She shook her head but squared her shoulders. "Tell me what to do." Over the next hour, Marcus performed the brutal but necessary work of stopping the bleeding. Florence did not flinch, following his instructions with steady hands even as her father's screams echoed through the valley. When it was done, Charles had mercifully passed out, and both Marcus and Florence were exhausted. They sat in the shade of the wagon, neither speaking for several minutes. Marcus offered her his canteen and she drank gratefully, water spilling down her chin. She no longer looked like the prim surveyor's daughter who had arrived in Silver Peak 3 weeks ago, all starched collars and Eastern refinement. She looked like a survivor. "Thank you," she finally said, "for saving our lives." "Just doing my job," Marcus replied, though they both knew it had been considerably more than that. Who were they? Why would anyone attack a surveying expedition? Marcus had been pondering the same question. Could be claim jumpers who think your father found something valuable, or maybe someone who does not want this road built. There are always interests competing out here. Florence looked at the scattered equipment, the notebooks lying in the dust. "Father has been surveying for 30 years. He is just a map maker," not a prospector. Sometimes that is enough. Knowledge is valuable, Miss Kingsley. A good map can be worth more than gold if it leads to the right places. She studied him with those penetrating green eyes. You may call me Florence, Mr. Finch. I think we have moved beyond formalities given the circumstances. Marcus, then. He found himself smiling despite the situation. Though my mother would probably insist on Mr. Finch. Where is your mother? Dead these past 5 years. Fever took her. I am sorry. Mine passed when I was 16. That is partly why I came west with father. I am all the family he has left. They fell into companionable silence, the shared losses creating an unexpected bond. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, painting the rocks in shades of amber and rust. Marcus knew they needed to make decisions about what came next. We should try to round up the horses, he said, standing and brushing dust from his trousers. At least some of them probably did not run far, and we need to check on Wesley. They found the other guard 300 yards down the valley, shot through the back. He had been running when he died, his gun still holstered. Marcus felt a flash of anger at the man's cowardice, though he supposed Wesley had paid the ultimate price for it. We should bury him, Florence said softly. Ground is too hard here and we do not have the time or tools. I will cover him with rocks, mark the spot. We can send someone back from Silver Peak. Florence helped gather stones, and they built a cairn over Wesley's body as the sun continued its descent. It was hard, sweaty work, and Marcus found himself impressed again by Florence's resilience. She did not complain, did not shy away from the grim task. By the time they finished, Marcus had managed to catch 2 of the horses, including his own sturdy roan gelding. The rest had scattered too far. They would have to leave most of the equipment behind and travel light. Can your father ride? Marcus asked as they returned to camp. I do not think so, not safely. Then we will have to rig a travois. It will be slower, but there is no other choice. Charles regained consciousness while they were fashioning the travois from tent poles and canvas. He was feverish, drifting in and out of lucidity, but insisted they take his survey notes and maps. 30 years of work, he mumbled. Cannot lose them. Florence, promise me. I promise, Father, we will save your notes. They worked into the evening, securing Charles onto the makeshift stretcher behind the stronger of the 2 horses. Marcus transferred essential supplies to his own mount, including water, food, and ammunition. Everything else would have to be abandoned. As darkness fell, Marcus made the decision to wait until dawn to move. Charles needed rest, and traveling at night through unfamiliar territory was asking for disaster. He built a small fire, mindful of attracting attention but knowing they needed warmth as the desert temperature plummeted. Florence sat beside her father, bathing his forehead with a damp cloth. Marcus prepared a simple meal of hardtack and beans, the smell of cooking food suddenly making him aware of how hungry he was. They had not eaten since morning. You should rest, he told Florence, bringing her a tin plate. I will watch over him. I could not sleep if I tried. She accepted the food anyway, eating mechanically. Do you think they will come back? The men who attacked us? Marcus considered lying to ease her worry but decided she deserved honesty. Possibly. But I wounded at least one, killed another. That usually makes men think twice about pressing their luck. We will post a watch just in case. I can help. I am not an invalid. I know you are not, but you have had a hard day, Florence. Your father will need you strong tomorrow. She looked at him across the fire, her face half in shadow. You are not what I expected when father hired a cowboy for protection. Oh, what did you expect? Someone rougher, I suppose. Less educated. You speak well for a gunman. Marcus laughed. My mother was a school teacher back in Kansas. She made sure I could read and write before I learned to shoot. Not that it did me much good in the end. Books do not pay the bills out here. Why did you come west? Same reason as most folks, looking for something better than what I left behind. My father drank himself to death after Mother passed. I sold the farm for debts and decided to start fresh. Turned out I was good with a gun and people will pay for that skill. You enjoy it. The violence? The question was direct, almost challenging. Marcus met her gaze. No. But I am good at protecting people and that matters. Your father would be dead right now if I had not been here. Florence looked away, chastened. You are right. I apologize. I did not mean to sound ungrateful. You are scared and exhausted. No apology needed. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Charles's breathing was labored but steady. The night sky revealed itself in all its desert glory, stars so numerous they looked like spilled salt. Tell me about the East, Marcus said eventually. I have never been further than Missouri. Florence's expression softened. Boston is beautiful but suffocating. So many rules about what a woman can and cannot do. I studied cartography and mathematics at a women's college, which was considered quite scandalous by some. Father supported me, though. He always said I had a head for numbers and spatial relationships. That is why you are out here, to do surveying work, partially. Also to prove something, I suppose, that I am more than drawing room conversations and tea parties. She smiled ruefully. I may have bitten off more than I could chew with this particular adventure. You did fine today. Better than fine. You kept your head while men with guns tried to kill you. That is not nothing. The compliment seemed to please her, color rising in her cheeks despite the firelight. Marcus realized he was staring and looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. She was his employer's daughter, an educated Eastern woman far above his station. The last thing either of them needed was him developing inappropriate feelings. I should check the perimeter, he said abruptly, standing. You get some rest. I will wake you in a few hours to take a watch. He walked the camp's perimeter, checking the horses and scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. The desert night was full of sounds, small animals rustling, the distant cry of a coyote, but nothing that suggested human presence. When he returned to the fire, Florence had fallen asleep despite her protests, curled up on a bedroll near her father. Marcus draped a blanket over her and settled in to watch the night pass. Sleep was a luxury he could not afford, not with wounded and exhausted people depending on him. Dawn came gradually, the darkness giving way to gray, and then to the brilliant oranges and pinks of a desert sunrise. Marcus made coffee, the smell waking Florence, who sat up with a start, momentarily disoriented. "How is father?" were her first words. "Fever is still present, but no worse. We need to get him to a doctor as soon as possible." They broke camp quickly, eating a cold breakfast and preparing for the journey. Marcus estimated they were 60 miles from Silver Peak, at least 2 days of travel with the travois slowing them down. If they pushed hard, they might make it in a day and a half. Charles was delirious when they roused him, talking about measurements and angles, his surveyor's mind working even as his body failed. Florence climbed onto the second horse, her riding position awkward in the long dress, but she managed well enough. "Stay close," Marcus told her. "If I say run, you run and do not look back. Your father would want you safe." "I am not leaving either of you, Florence. Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. We survive together or not at all." Her jaw was set, and Marcus recognized the futility of arguing. He nodded curtly and mounted his own horse, checking the travois one last time before they set out. The journey was brutal. The August heat climbed steadily as morning progressed, turning the air into something thick and oppressive. Charles groaned with every bump and jostle, and Marcus tried to pick the smoothest route possible, but the terrain was unforgiving. They stopped frequently to give Charles water and check his wound. The cauterization had held, but infection was a real risk. Florence rode in grim silence, her face pale beneath its coating of dust. Marcus found himself watching her more than was strictly necessary, concerned by her exhaustion. Around midday, as they traversed a narrow canyon, Marcus spotted dust rising in the distance behind them. Riders, moving fast. "We have company," he said quietly. Florence twisted in her saddle to look. "The same men, possibly, or maybe just travelers, but I do not want to wait and find out." He scanned the canyon walls, looking for a defensive position. "There, see that outcrop? We can take cover there." They urged the horses into the shelter of a rock formation that provided overhead protection and good sight lines. Marcus helped Florence dismount and positioned himself where he could watch their back trail. "Load the rifle," he told her. "Same as yesterday. Are you going to kill more people?" Her voice was shaky. "Only if they try to kill us first." The riders came into view 15 minutes later, 3 men on horseback, moving with purpose. Marcus recognized one of them from the previous day's ambush, a tall figure in a black hat. They were being hunted, and the hunters had found their trail. Marcus made a decision. "Listen carefully. Take your father and head up that draw to the north. Follow it until you find water. There should be a creek about 2 miles up. Wait there for me." "What are you going to do?" "Lead them away from you. They want those survey maps your father made. If they think I have them, they will follow me." "That is insane. They will kill you." "Maybe, but at least you and your father will have a chance." He pulled several of the notebooks from his saddlebag and held them up. "Do I have your father's notes memorized enough to make this believable?" Florence stared at him, emotions warring across her face. "Why would you do this for us?" "Because it is the right thing to do. Because your father is a good man. Because you deserve to see Boston again. Because I think I could fall in love with you if given half a chance," he did not add. "I cannot let you sacrifice yourself. It is not your choice." Marcus's voice was firm. "Now go while there is still time. I will find you when I can." For a moment he thought she would refuse, but then she stepped forward and kissed his cheek, quick and fierce. "Do not get yourself killed, Marcus Finch. That is an order." Then she was moving, leading the horse carrying her father up the narrow draw. Marcus watched until they disappeared around a bend, then turned to face the approaching riders. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady as he checked his guns. The 3 men spread out as they approached, wary now. The one in the black hat called out, "We do not want trouble, friend. Just hand over the survey maps and we will let you ride on." "I do not think I will do that," Marcus called back. "These maps are not yours. The surveyor is dead or dying. His daughter too, most likely. Those maps do nobody any good buried in the desert. We are prepared to pay." So they did not know Charles and Florence were alive. That was good. "How much?" Marcus asked, playing for time. $50. Gold. It was a decent sum, but Marcus knew the maps were worth far more to whoever wanted them. "Make it 100 and we have a deal." The men conferred among themselves. Marcus used the distraction to plan his escape route. He would need to lead them on a chase long enough for Florence to gain distance, then lose them in the rough terrain to the east. $100, the leader finally agreed, "but we see the maps first." Marcus held up one of the notebooks, fanning its pages. This and 3 others. Complete surveys of the eastern territories, including mineral deposits and water rights. Worth a fortune to the right buyer. "Bring them here." "No, you bring the money halfway, I will do the same with the maps. We make the exchange and part as friends." More conferring. Marcus could see their suspicion, but greed won out. The leader dismounted and walked forward with a leather pouch, stopping at the midpoint. Marcus moved to meet him, acutely aware that the other two men had their hands near their guns. As soon as the exchange was made, Marcus knew the betrayal was coming. He saw it in the leader's eyes, the slight tensing of his shoulders. Marcus threw himself sideways as guns barked, the leader's shot missing by inches. Marcus fired from his back, putting a bullet through the man's knee. Then he was rolling, running for his horse as bullets chewed up the ground around him. He swung into the saddle and kicked the roan into a gallop, leaning low over its neck. Behind him, the two remaining ambushers scrambled for their own mounts. The chase was on. Marcus pushed his horse hard, following a twisting route through the canyons that led east away from where Florence was hiding. The roan was a good animal, sure-footed and fast, but the men behind him were determined. For 2 hours, they played a deadly game through the desert landscape. Marcus used every trick he knew, doubling back, riding through streams to hide his trail, pushing through thorny brush that would slow pursuers. Twice they got close enough to shoot at him, bullets whining past. Finally, Marcus reached a stretch of broken country where the rock formations created a natural maze. He dismounted and led his horse through passages too narrow for riding, working his way deeper into the labyrinth. The sounds of pursuit faded and eventually stopped altogether. Marcus waited in the shadows, every sense alert. An hour passed, then 2. The sun was declining toward evening when he finally emerged, confident he had lost them. Now came the hard part, finding Florence and Charles again. He backtracked carefully, taking a circuitous route in case the ambushers had given up the immediate chase but were still watching. It was full dark by the time he approached the draw where he had sent Florence. "It is Marcus," he called softly as he neared the creek. "Do not shoot." Florence appeared from behind a boulder, the rifle in her hands, and the relief on her face was palpable. "You came back, I thought, I feared. I am hard to kill." He dismounted, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the chase was fading, leaving him shaky. "How is your father?" "Worse. The fever is climbing." Her voice broke. "We need to get him to Silver Peak soon or—" She did not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. Marcus examined Charles in the firelight Florence had built in a sheltered spot. The Surveyor was burning up, barely conscious. They were out of time. "We ride through the night," Marcus decided. "No more delays. Can you manage?" "Yes." They rigged the travois again and set out under the stars. The temperature dropped, which was a blessing and a curse. The coolness helped Charles's fever but made the journey more uncomfortable for the rest of them. Florence shivered in her thin dress, and Marcus finally insisted she wear his coat despite her protests. "I am used to the cold," he said, draping it over her shoulders, "and you will do your father no good if you catch pneumonia." The coat was too large for her, swallowing her small frame, but she pulled it close gratefully. "Thank you for everything. I know this is far beyond what Father hired you for. He hired me to protect you both. That is what I am doing." They rode in silence for a while, the horses picking their way carefully through the darkness. Marcus led, trusting his mount's instincts and his own knowledge of the terrain. Behind him, he could hear Florence's horse following, the travois dragging with a soft whisper across the ground. "Marcus." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Yes. When this is over, when Father is safe, will you stay in Silver Peak? Or do you move on to the next job?" The question surprised him. "I had not thought that far ahead. Why do you ask?" I would like to know you better, in circumstances that do not involve people shooting at us." His heart did something complicated in his chest. "I would like that too." "Good." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Then you have something to survive for, motivation to get us through this safely." I already had that motivation. The words hung in the air between them, full of unspoken meaning. Marcus did not turn around, kept his eyes on the path ahead, but he felt the weight of that moment. Something had shifted between them, forged in blood and fear and unexpected tenderness. They rode on through the night. Charles's condition deteriorated, his breathing becoming more labored, his delirium worsening. Florence talked to him constantly, her voice steady even when Marcus knew she must be terrified. She told her father about Boston, about their house there, about plans for future surveys. She told him he could not die because she had no idea how to run a surveying business, and he would have to teach her properly first. Dawn found them within sight of Silver Peak, the small town nestled in a valley between two ridges of silver-bearing rock that gave it its name. Marcus had never been so relieved to see civilization. They rode straight to the doctor's office, a small frame building on the main street. Marcus pounded on the door until a bleary-eyed man in his 60s answered, grumbling about the hour until he saw Charles's condition. "Bring him in, quickly," Dr. Hammond said, suddenly alert and professional. They carried Charles inside to the examination room. The doctor shooed them out, and Marcus and Florence found themselves standing on the wooden sidewalk, suddenly purposeless after days of constant crisis. Florence swayed on her feet and Marcus caught her elbow. "When did you last sleep properly?" "I cannot remember. 2 days. 3. Come on. There is a hotel across the street. You need rest. I should stay with Father. The doctor will come get you if anything changes." "You are dead on your feet, Florence. You will do nobody any good like this." He guided her to the hotel, the Golden Sage, where a suspicious desk clerk took in their disheveled, dust-covered appearance. Marcus slapped down enough coins for 2 rooms and a bath, and the man's expression shifted to something more accommodating. "The lady needs hot water brought up immediately," Marcus said. "And food, whatever your kitchen can manage. Right away, sir." Marcus saw Florence to her room, which was small but clean. She stood in the middle of it, looking lost. The past few days seemed to catch up with her all at once, and she started to tremble. "Hey," Marcus said gently, taking her hands. "You did it. Your father is in good hands now. You can let go." And she did, breaking down in great shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Marcus pulled her against his chest and held her while she cried, one hand stroking her dusty hair. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. When the storm passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I am sorry. That was not very stoic of me. You are allowed to be human, Florence. What you did out there, it was extraordinary. You saved your father's life as much as I did." She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but warm. "We saved each other, I think." Someone knocked on the door, interrupting the moment. Hotel staff with hot water for the bath and a tray of food. Marcus stepped back, suddenly aware of the impropriety of being alone with her in a hotel room. "Get cleaned up and rest," he said. "I will check on your father and come find you later." He left before she could protest, his heart still racing from holding her. The memory of her body against his, the smell of her hair despite the dust, the way she had looked at him, it all threatened to overwhelm his normally sensible nature. Marcus got his own room and cleaned up, washing away days of grime and blood. The face in the small mirror looked older than his 24 years, hardened by sun and violence, but Florence had seen something worth caring about there. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He returned to the doctor's office to find Hammond working over Charles with practiced efficiency. The older man looked up when Marcus entered. "You got him here just in time. Another 6 hours and he would be past saving. As it is, he has a fighting chance now. Will he live?" "That is up to God and his own constitution. The wound is infected, but I have cleaned it thoroughly and administered what treatments I can. The next 48 hours will tell." Marcus thanked him and headed to the sheriff's office to report the attacks. Sheriff Warren was a grizzled man in his 50s who listened to Marcus's account with growing concern. "That is the third surveying team attacked in as many months," Warren said. "Something is going on, though I am damned if I know what. You say they specifically wanted the maps." They seemed to know what Charles Kingsley was surveying and wanted that information badly enough to kill for it. Could be mining interests, could be railroad speculation. Hell, could be anything out here. Land rights are a mess of competing claims. Warren leaned back in his chair. "You killed 2 men, you said, in self-defense. They shot first. I believe you, son. But there will need to be an inquest once things settle down. For now, I will ride out and recover the bodies, see if we can identify them." Marcus left the sheriff's office feeling the weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. He had not slept in 2 days, and the accumulated stress of keeping everyone alive was catching up with him. He needed rest, but first he needed to check on Florence. He found her in the hotel dining room, cleaned up and wearing a new dress she must have purchased from the general store. Her hair was pinned up properly again, and without the dust and fear, she was breathtaking. Several men in the room were staring, and Marcus felt an irrational surge of possessiveness. "How is father?" she asked immediately when she saw him, holding his own. "The doctor thinks he has a good chance if he can fight through the next 2 days. Relief flooded her face. "Thank God. I do not know what I would have done if he had died because of me." "Because of you? Florence, none of this was your fault. Was it not? I encouraged father to take this commission. I wanted adventure, wanted to prove I could handle field work, and now he is fighting for his life." Marcus sat down across from her, taking her hand across the table despite the impropriety. "Your father is a grown man who makes his own choices. He was proud to have you working with him. Anyone could see that. What happened out there was not about you or your abilities. Someone wanted information badly enough to kill for it, and that is on them, not you." She squeezed his hand, her green eyes searching his face. "You have a way of making sense of things, Marcus Finch. Years of practice talking myself out of trouble." They ate together, a simple meal that tasted like a feast after days of hardtack and beans. Other diners whispered and stared, clearly curious about the trail-worn strangers, but Marcus ignored them. His attention was fully on Florence, the way she talked with her hands when describing her studies, the intelligence that shone through every word. She told him about her college, about the struggle to be taken seriously in a field dominated by men. She talked about her dreams of starting her own surveying company, of opening up opportunities for other women with mathematical minds. Marcus found himself fascinated, not just by her ambitions but by her, the entire complicated, brilliant package. "What about you?" she asked eventually. "What are your dreams beyond the next protection job?" Marcus considered the question. Nobody had asked him that in years. "I suppose I want land of my own someday. Nothing fancy, just enough acres to run cattle or horses, a place to build something permanent." "That sounds lonely." "Just you and the cows." He met her eyes. "I had not planned on being alone forever, just have not met the right person yet." The air between them grew charged. Florence's cheeks colored, but she did not look away. "Perhaps you just were not looking in the right places." "Perhaps I needed someone to map out the path for me." She laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Was that a surveying joke, Mr. Finch? I am a terrible influence on you." They talked until the dining room staff began giving them pointed looks about the late hour. Reluctantly, they headed upstairs, stopping outside Florence's door. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "And the conversation. I had forgotten what it was like to talk to someone who listens. Any time." Marcus hesitated, then said, "I should tell you, I will be staying in Silver Peak while your father recovers, to make sure there are no further threats. I had hoped you would say that." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, letting her lips linger a moment longer than strictly friendly. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Florence." He returned to his own room but found sleep elusive despite his exhaustion. His mind kept replaying moments from the past days, from the terror of the ambush to the intimacy of their conversations. Florence Kingsley had gotten under his skin in a way no woman ever had before. The next 2 days passed in a strange limbo. Marcus divided his time between checking on Charles, who slowly improved under the doctor's care, and spending time with Florence. They explored Silver Peak together, a small town but prosperous thanks to the nearby mines. They walked the dusty streets, visited the general store, sat on the hotel porch and watched the world go by. Florence was endlessly curious about Western life, asking questions about everything from mining operations to Native American relations to the territorial government. Marcus found himself enjoying the role of guide and teacher, showing her aspects of frontier life she had only read about in books. On the 3rd day, Charles regained full consciousness. Marcus waited outside the doctor's office while Florence went in alone to see her father. When she emerged an hour later, her eyes were red but her smile was genuine. "He is going to live," she said simply, and Marcus felt his own relief wash through him. "That is wonderful news. He wants to see you, to thank you properly." Marcus entered the small room where Charles lay, still pale but clear-eyed. The surveyor extended a shaky hand, which Marcus clasped carefully. "My daughter tells me I owe you my life," Charles said, "and hers as well. That is a debt I can never properly repay. You hired me to do a job, sir. I just did it. We both know it was far more than that. Florence also tells me you led the attackers away, risked yourself to protect her. That goes beyond any employment contract." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, they would not have. You are a good man, Marcus Finch." Charles paused, studying him with knowing eyes. "My daughter has spoken of little else but you these past days. I am not so ill that I cannot see which way the wind blows." Marcus felt heat rise in his face. "Sir, I assure you, my intentions are honorable. I never doubted it. But I will say this plainly. Florence is my only child, the light of my life. She is educated, strong-willed, and far too clever for most men. If you have feelings for her, and I suspect you do, you had better be prepared for a woman who will challenge you every day of your life." "I think I would like that," Marcus said quietly. Charles smiled. "Good. Then you have my blessing for what it is worth, though I suspect Florence would pursue what she wants regardless of my opinion." Over the following week, as Charles continued to recover, Marcus and Florence grew closer. They took long walks outside of town, Florence sketching maps and making calculations while Marcus kept watch. She taught him the basics of surveying, how to use the instruments, how to calculate angles and distances. He taught her to shoot more accurately, to track animals and read weather signs. One afternoon, they rode out to a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of desert and mountains. Florence had her father's transit set up, taking measurements while Marcus sat on a boulder watching her work. The sun was beginning its descent, painting everything in shades of gold. "What do you see when you look out there?" Florence asked, lowering the instrument and turning to him. "Land, possibility, danger if you are not careful. I see patterns, mathematical relationships between earth and sky, ways to measure and map and understand." She came to sit beside him on the boulder. "But lately I have been seeing something else too." "What is that?" "A future, one I had not expected or planned for." She took his hand, her fingers slim and strong, "with someone I had not expected to meet." Marcus turned to face her fully. Florence, I am just a cowboy with a gun. I do not have much to offer an educated woman from Boston. You have yourself, Marcus, your courage, your kindness, your strength. That is more than enough. She reached up to touch his face. These past weeks, you have shown me what real partnership looks like. Not someone who wants to protect me from the world, but someone who trusts me to stand beside him against it. I do trust you. You are the strongest person I have ever met. Then kiss me, you foolish man. I have been waiting days for you to work up the courage. Marcus laughed and did as she asked, pulling her close and capturing her lips with his. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and fierce, full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I am in love with you, Marcus said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I am in love with you anyway. It is not too soon at all, Florence replied, her eyes shining. I fell in love with you when you threw yourself between me and those bullets, when you held me while I cried, when you looked at my surveying work with genuine interest instead of condescension. She kissed him again, softer this time. I am in love with you too, Marcus Finch. They sat on that boulder as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and promises. Florence would stay in Silver Peak while her father recovered. When he was well enough, they would complete the survey together, this time with Marcus as a full partner. After that, well, they would figure it out together. I want to build something with you, Florence said. Not just maps and surveys, but a life. Is that too forward of me? Not at all. I want that too, a ranch eventually and your surveying business. We can have both. Children someday. If we are blessed with them. Then I suppose you will have to marry me, Mr. Finch. Marcus pulled back to look at her, startled. Are you proposing to me? I am a modern woman. Why should I wait for you to ask? Her eyes danced with mischief, but beneath it was real vulnerability. So what do you say? Will you marry a stubborn surveyor's daughter who cannot cook and has opinions about everything? I absolutely will. But I am proposing properly first. Marcus slid off the boulder to kneel in the dust, taking her hand. Florence Kingsley, you are brilliant and brave and beautiful. You make me want to be better than I am. Will you marry me? Yes, she said, pulling him up for another kiss. Yes, of course, yes. They rode back to town as the stars emerged, giddy with plans and possibilities. Charles, when they told him, feigned surprise, but his knowing smile suggested he had seen this coming from the start. When? He asked. Soon, Florence said. As soon as you are well enough to walk me down the aisle. Then I had better heal quickly. I am not letting anyone else give away my daughter. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in Silver Peak's small church. Charles had recovered enough to stand, though he leaned heavily on a cane. Florence wore a simple cream-colored dress purchased from the general store, with wildflowers in her hair that Marcus had picked himself that morning. The ceremony was attended by half the town, curious about the surveyor's daughter and the cowboy who had saved her life. Sheriff Warren served as best man, and the doctor's wife stood up with Florence. The preacher kept it mercifully short, and when Marcus kissed his bride, the small crowd erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Golden Sage Hotel, with dancing and food that went on late into the night. Marcus held Florence in his arms as they swayed to fiddle music, her head resting against his shoulder, and felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it, this sense of belonging, of home. Happy, he murmured into her hair. Impossibly so, she replied, though I suspect life with you will never be boring. I could say the same about you, Mrs. Finch. She laughed, the sound like music. Mrs. Finch, I like how that sounds. They spent their wedding night in the hotel's best room, decorated with flowers and ribbons by well-meaning townsfolk. In the privacy of that space, They came together with a mixture of nervousness and joy, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Florence was passionate and unafraid, meeting Marcus as an equal partner in this as in everything else. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets with her head on his chest, Florence traced idle patterns on his skin. "I have something to tell you." "What is that?" "While you were helping Father with his exercises today, I met with a man from Carson City. He is interested in commissioning a major survey of the territory's water sources. It would be months of work, well paid, and he specifically asked if we could handle it as a team." Marcus propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. I may have told him about a cowboy with excellent tracking skills and steady nerves who happens to be married to a surveyor. He thinks we would make an ideal team for the more remote areas." She bit her lip. "What do you think?" "I know it is dangerous work. I think it sounds perfect. We can save the money toward buying that ranch. So you are not upset that your new wife wants to drag you across the territory measuring rivers?" "I would follow you anywhere, Florence Finch. Rivers, mountains, deserts, wherever you want to map." She kissed him thoroughly. "Have I mentioned recently that I love you?" "Not in the last 5 minutes. I was starting to worry." She laughed and kissed him again, and they spent the rest of the night showing each other exactly how much they were loved. The next morning, Charles was released from the doctor's care with strict instructions to take things easy. He moved into a small house on the edge of town that he had rented while recovering, and Marcus and Florence took rooms at a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. Over the following months, they established a routine. Florence and Charles worked on completing the original survey, now properly guarded by Marcus and 2 additional men the sheriff recommended. The second expedition went smoothly. No attacks or incidents. Whoever had wanted the information before seemed to have given up or moved on. Marcus proved to have a natural aptitude for surveying work. His spatial awareness, honed by years of tracking and navigation, translated well to reading terrain and calculating distances. Florence was a patient teacher, and he found genuine enjoyment in the work's precision and problem-solving. In the evenings, they would return to their small rooms and Florence would teach Marcus mathematics, geometry, the science behind the surveying arts. He in turn taught her more about wilderness survival, tracking, the practical skills that kept people alive on the frontier. They were building something together, a partnership that went far beyond traditional marriage roles. The Carson City Commission came through in late October. Charles decided to sit this one out, his legs still bothering him on long treks, but he helped them prepare and plan the expedition. This time, they would have a full crew: Marcus and Florence, 2 assistants, a cook, and another guard. It was to be a 3-month survey of the territory's eastern water sources, critical information for future settlement. The night before they left, Marcus and Florence sat on the porch of their boarding house, watching Silver Peak settle in for the night. Florence leaned against his shoulder, content. "Nervous?" Marcus asked. "Excited. This is what I studied for, what I dreamed about, doing real, important work." "You know people will talk. A woman leading a surveying expedition. Let them talk. I have you watching my back and my father's reputation backing the work. That is all I need." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "You are remarkable, you know that. You may have mentioned it once or twice." The expedition departed the next morning in good spirits. The work was hard but satisfying, and Florence proved herself a natural leader. The crew respected her knowledge and deferred to her judgments. Marcus found himself in the role of second in command, handling logistics and security while Florence focused on the actual surveying. They mapped rivers and streams, charted potential well sites, documented everything meticulously. At night, in their tent, They would review the day's work and plan the next day's route. And when the planning was done, they would lose themselves in each other, their connection growing deeper with each passing week. One night, about 2 months into the expedition, Florence pulled out a notebook Marcus had not seen before. "I have been working on something, a personal project." "What is it?" She opened the book to reveal detailed maps, but not of terrain. These were more abstract, with notes in her precise handwriting. "I have been mapping something else. The path we took from Silver Peak to where we first met the ambush, where we hid, where you led them away. Our entire journey." Marcus looked at the pages, seeing their story rendered in lines and calculations. "Why?" "Because it was important, because I never want to forget those days when everything changed." She turned to a page near the end where she had written in careful script, "The day I fell in love." "Florence," he breathed, moved beyond words. "I know it is sentimental and probably foolish, but I wanted to preserve it somehow, to show our children someday, maybe." She looked up at him. "You mapped a path to my heart, Marcus. It seems only right that I document it properly." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I know. I feel the same way." They made love slowly that night, a reaffirmation of everything they had become to each other. Afterwards, Florence fell asleep in his arms and Marcus lay awake listening to her breathe, marveling at the strange turns life could take. 6 months ago, he had been a drifter with a gun, no ties and no prospects. Now he had a wife he adored, meaningful work, and a future full of possibility. The expedition concluded successfully in January 1884. They returned to Silver Peak to find Charles fully recovered and eager to hear about their work. The Carson City Commission was so impressed with the results that they immediately commissioned 2 more surveys for the coming year. Marcus and Florence spent the winter months working on the reports, translating raw data into finished maps and documentation. It was tedious work, but they did it together. Side by side in the small office Charles had rented on Silver Peak's Main Street. The Kingsley and Finch Surveying Company, the sign outside read. Charles had insisted Marcus's name be included, recognizing his contributions. In early March, Florence realized she had missed her monthly courses. The doctor confirmed what she already suspected. She was pregnant. She broke the news to Marcus one evening after dinner, simply taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "There is someone else who wants to meet you," she said softly. It took him a moment to understand, and then his face transformed with joy. "Are you certain?" "As certain as the doctor can make me. Due in October, he thinks." Marcus swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got dizzy. "We are having a baby. We are having a baby. I take it you are pleased." "Pleased, Florence, I am delighted." Terrified but delighted. He set her down gently. "Are you happy about it?" "Scared out of my mind, but yes, very happy." She took his hands. "I want to keep working as long as I can. The pregnancy should not stop me from surveying, at least not for several months. We will do whatever you want. Though I reserve the right to be overprotective and hover. I would expect nothing less." They told Charles the next day, and the older man broke down in happy tears, holding Florence close. "A grandfather. I am going to be a grandfather. Your mother would have been so pleased." The spring and summer passed in a blur of work and preparation. Florence continued surveying into her 6th month, her expanding belly hidden under loose clothing. She finally agreed to stop field work when the terrain became too difficult to navigate safely. But she continued working on map drafting and calculations right up until her water broke in early October. The labor was long and difficult. Marcus paced the waiting area of Dr. Hammond's office for 14 hours, imagining every possible catastrophe, while Florence's screams echoed through the building. Charles sat beside him, offering what comfort he could, but Marcus was nearly mad with worry by the time the doctor finally emerged. "You have a son," Hammond said, his lined face breaking into a smile. "And your wife is fine, though exhausted. They are both perfectly healthy." Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. "Can I see them? Give her a few minutes to get cleaned up. You will have plenty of time." When Marcus finally entered the room, Florence was propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat but her eyes glowing. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Marcus approached on shaky legs and looked down at the tiny red face peeking from the blankets. The baby was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. As Marcus watched, the infant's eyes opened, unfocused but searching. "He is beautiful," Marcus whispered. "Like his mother. He has your nose, I think. Poor child," Florence laughed, then winced. "Do you want to hold him?" Marcus carefully took his son, cradling the baby against his chest. The weight was almost nothing, but the responsibility felt enormous. This tiny person was depending on him, trusting him. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Hello there," Marcus murmured. "I am your father, and I promise you I am going to do my very best by you." The baby made a small noise, and Marcus felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "What should we name him?" Florence asked. They had discussed names but never reached a final decision. Now, looking at his son, Marcus knew. "Charles, after your father." "Charles Marcus Finch, if that suits you." Florence's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Father will be honored." Charles Kingsley indeed was honored and took to being a grandfather with enthusiasm. Little Charlie, as they called him, became the center of their world. Florence recovered from the birth with her typical determination, and within weeks was back to desk work, the baby sleeping in a cradle beside her. They adjusted to parenthood with a mixture of joy and exhaustion. Sleepless nights gave way to first smiles, which gave way to first teeth. Marcus discovered a talent for soothing the baby that amazed everyone, including himself. He would walk Charlie around their small house for hours, talking quietly about horses and tracking, and all the things he would teach his son someday. Florence returned to limited field work the following spring when Charlie was 6 months old, leaving him with his grandfather for short expeditions. It was not ideal, but they made it work, cobbling together a life that honored both Florence's career ambitions and their responsibilities as parents. The Kingsley and Finch Surveying Company thrived. Their reputation for accurate work and reliability spread, and they had more commissions than they could handle. Marcus hired 2 more guards and trained them personally, unwilling to risk another ambush situation. By Charlie's 2nd birthday, they had saved enough to buy land. Marcus found a perfect spot 15 miles outside Silver Peak, a valley with good water and grazing land. They built a modest house, and Marcus started a small horse breeding operation while continuing to work surveys with Florence. Charles Kingsley moved into a cottage on their property, his leg never quite recovering enough for field work, but his mind still sharp for calculations and planning. He was endlessly patient with young Charlie, teaching the toddler his numbers and shapes, already grooming him for the family business. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Summers meant surveying expeditions, shorter ones now that they had the ranch to maintain. Winters meant working on maps and reports while managing the growing horse herd. Spring and fall were for family, for teaching Charlie to ride, for walks through their valley, for quiet evenings on the porch. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Florence surprised Marcus with a gift. It was a leather-bound book, professionally printed, containing maps. But not just any maps, These were the ones she had been keeping since their first expedition together, documenting their journey. I had them properly drafted, she explained as Marcus paged through, so they would last. Our story preserved in ink and paper. The final map showed their ranch, their house, the paths they walked daily, and written at the bottom in Florence's elegant script were the words, "Here is where he led me home." Marcus pulled her close, overwhelmed with emotion. "You mapped a path to my heart," he said quietly, "and I have been following it ever since. It goes both ways, you know. You changed everything for me, showed me I could be both a surveyor and a wife, both ambitious and in love, that I did not have to choose." They kissed as the sun set over their valley, 5 years married and more in love than ever. Young Charlie played at their feet, and through the cottage window they could see Charles Kingsley working on equations, still contributing despite his years. 2 years later, Florence gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Grace. She was as fierce and determined as her mother, with Marcus's dark coloring and Florence's green eyes. Charlie adored his baby sister, treating her with a gentleness that made both parents' hearts swell. The surveying business continued to grow. By 1890, they had expanded to 6 teams working across Nevada and into neighboring territories. Marcus handled all the security and logistics, while Florence managed the technical aspects. Charles, now in his 60s, supervised the drafting and report writing from his cottage office. Young Charlie showed an early aptitude for mathematics and spatial relationships, no surprise given his parentage and grandfather's influence. Catherine, meanwhile, seemed destined to follow her father's path, more interested in the horses than the maps. Marcus taught her to ride almost before she could walk, the two of them developing a special bond. As the new century approached, Marcus and Florence would sometimes sit on their porch after the children were in bed and reflect on how far they had come. From those terrifying days in the desert to this peaceful valley, from strangers to soulmates, from survival to thriving. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked one evening. Giving up the excitement of those early days, Florence considered the question seriously. "I do not think I gave anything up. I just exchanged one kind of adventure for another, the adventure of building a life, raising children, creating something lasting." She took his hand. "Do you regret it? You could have kept drifting, stayed free." "Not for a single moment." "You are my home, Florence. You and the children. Everything else is just details. Such a romantic for a cowboy. You bring it out in me." They laughed together, the sound carrying across their valley. Inside, their children slept peacefully. In his cottage, Charles Kingsley worked on his memoirs, documenting a life well lived. And across Nevada, maps bearing the Kingsley and Finch name helped settlers find water, miners stake claims, and families build futures. Marcus Finch had once been a drifter with a gun, looking for purpose. Florence Kingsley had been an ambitious young woman fighting for respect in a man's world. They had found each other in violence and fear, but built their love in patience and partnership. Their story was written across the Nevada landscape in survey lines and map coordinates, a testament to courage, determination, and the transformative power of love. As Marcus held his wife and watched the stars emerge over their ranch, he thought about that first day, the bullet that had nearly ended everything before it began. He thought about Florence standing in the desert dust, too shocked to move. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, to this moment of peace and contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Florence asked, reading his expression in the way only she could. "Just remembering. That first day when I thought this would be just another job. And instead you got a wife, 2 children, and a surveying business. Best decision I ever made, taking that job. The best decision you ever made was not getting yourself killed protecting us. That too. Florence shifted to look at him directly. You know what I remember most clearly from those days? Not the fear or the violence, but the moment I realized I could trust you completely. That you saw me as a partner, not something fragile to be protected. You were never fragile. Even covered in dust and exhausted, you were the strongest person I had ever met. We were strong together. We still are. It was the simple truth of their relationship, the foundation on which everything else was built. They were partners in every sense, balancing and supporting each other, making each other better. The years continued to pass in the way of all good things, marked by birthdays and anniversaries, by successful surveys and growing herds, by children growing into young adults with their own dreams and ambitions. Charles Kingsley passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 68, surrounded by family, his life's work preserved in hundreds of maps and thousands of pages of calculations. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a headstone that read, Charles Kingsley, Master Surveyor, beloved father and grandfather. He measured the land and found it good. His death was hard on all of them, but especially Florence, who had lost her last connection to her childhood. Marcus held her through the grief, and slowly they found their footing again. Young Charlie, now a teenager, took on more responsibility in the business, already showing the brilliance that would make him a legendary surveyor in his own right. Catherine, at 12, was more interested in managing the ranch than surveying. She had her father's way with horses and her mother's head for business, a combination that would serve her well. Marcus taught her everything he knew about horsemanship, breeding, and ranch management, preparing her to take over that side of their operations. By 1895, Marcus was 43 and Florence 41. They had been married 12 years, and the love between them had only deepened with time. The passion of those early days had matured into something richer, a profound intimacy born of shared struggle and triumph. One evening in late summer, they rode out to a ridge overlooking the valley, the same spot where Florence had once taken surveying measurements and Marcus had first confessed his love. They dismounted and sat together as the sun painted the sky in impossible colors. "Do you remember what I told you here?" Marcus asked. "All those years ago, you said you were in love with me, that it was too soon but you could not help it. I was terrified, convinced you would laugh or think I was foolish. I was terrified too. I had never felt anything like that before, did not know what to do with it. I am glad we figured it out." Florence leaned against him. "So am I. Look what we built together. The business, the ranch, our children. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. You made it possible. Your vision, your determination. Our vision, our determination." She turned to kiss him softly. "Equal partners, remember, equal partners," he agreed. As night fell, they rode back to the ranch house where Catherine was helping prepare dinner and Charlie was working on survey calculations, so like his grandfather. The house was full of life and light and love, exactly what Marcus had dreamed of when he first spoke of wanting land of his own. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. The Kingsley and Finch Surveying Company had become one of the most respected in the Western Territories, their work instrumental in the region's development. Young Charlie took over more of the daily operations as Marcus and Florence gradually stepped back. Though neither could quite give up field work entirely, Catherine married at 21, choosing a rancher's son from a neighboring valley. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half of Silver Peak in attendance. Marcus walked his daughter down the aisle with pride and a touch of sadness, knowing he was sharing her with someone else now. But Florence squeezed his hand and whispered, "We raised her to be strong and make her own choices." This is what success looks like. Charlie married 2 years later, choosing a schoolteacher from Carson City. She was practical and clever, a perfect match for his methodical nature. They built a house on the ranch property and began filling it with children, grandchildren who kept Marcus and Florence young with their energy and demands. As Marcus and Florence entered their 50s, they finally began to slow down. The business was in capable hands with Charlie and his wife. The ranch was thriving under Catherine's management. They had built something sustainable, something that would outlast them. They spent more time together now, taking long rides through the valley, revisiting the places that marked their history. They traveled too, finally taking that trip to Boston Florence had talked about, where Marcus met her distant relatives and saw the college where she had studied. It was interesting, but they both agreed Nevada felt more like home. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over the territory, dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the Finches in one way or another. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter. But the moment Marcus treasured most came later, when the crowd had thinned and he and Florence stood alone under the stars. She pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more gift," she said. "I have been working on it for months." Inside was another leather-bound book. Marcus opened it to find it was a continuation of the original maps, documenting their life together year by year. Marriages, births, deaths, business triumphs, personal milestones, all rendered in Florence's precise cartographic style. The final page showed the ranch as it stood now, with all its buildings and people, and written at the bottom were the words, "You mapped a path to my heart, and I have been following it home ever since." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Florence, this is beautiful, but you have it backwards." "What do you mean?" He took her hand, pressing it against his chest. "You were the one who showed me the way home. I was lost before I met you, just drifting with no purpose. You gave me direction, meaning a reason to build something instead of just surviving." "We gave those things to each other," Florence said firmly. "That is what love is, Marcus. Mapping out a life together, one choice at a time, until you look back and see you have created something beautiful." He kissed her then, deep and loving, tasting salt from tears he had not realized he was shedding. 25 years, and she could still move him to tears with her words and her gifts and her unwavering love. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I know, I feel the same way." She smiled, her green eyes glowing in the starlight. "You are my great adventure, Marcus Finch. Not the surveys or the business or even the children, wonderful as they are. You. Loving you, building a life with you, that has been my greatest achievement." They stood together under the Nevada stars, two people who had found each other in violence and fear, who had chosen each other every day since. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and peaceful. Their children and grandchildren slept in houses they had helped build. The business they had created together would continue for generations, their names on maps across the West. It was not the life either of them had imagined in their youth. It was better. Marcus Finch, the drifting cowboy, had found his home. Florence Kingsley, the ambitious surveyor, had found her equal partner. Together, they had mapped out something more valuable than any territory or mineral deposit. They had mapped out a life worth living, built on love and respect and unwavering partnership. And when historians later studied the development of Nevada in the late 19th century, they would find the Kingsley and Finch maps in archives and museums, marveling at their accuracy and detail. But the real map, the one that mattered most, was written in the lines of Marcus and Florence's faces, in the legacy of their children in the valley where their ranch still stood decades later. It was a map of love, drawn in courage and sealed with devotion, and it led, always and forever, home.